They weren't coming to market, and the promises to investors were starting to ring hollow. All of this was compounded by major issues with patents held by a major competitor that threatened Moderna's ability to turn a profit on anything that it might manage to get to the market. There was also issues with its mRNA delivery system, which led the company to abandon any treatment that would require more than one dose because of toxicity concerns. Now, this was a huge issue, but has been pretty much ignored by media outlets, Fauci, the CDC, FDA, you name it. Everyone's turned their heads. In fact, there's no evidence that Moderna ever resolved the toxicity issue that arose in multi-dose products. Safety concerns were well known about Moderna before COVID-19, yet they had been ignored by everyone. Everyone in health, the media, everyone, health authorities, the government, the alphabet soup agencies, that it's been ignored by everyone during the pandemic. And the fact is that Moderna was in so much financial trouble that they'll need to sell this vaccine for several years. Let's just break it down this way. COVID-19 created opportunity. The government handed $9 billion over to Moderna, and distribution of vaccines and boosters need to be continued into the next several years for them to get back on their feet. So my question to you, was this a bailout? I mean, seriously, the company is now worth $126.7 billion with major investments from the U.S. government, the U.S. military, ties to the world's richest, and all of that will deteriorate pretty quickly without the continuation of the sales of the vaccine, which is still, again, under the EUA. The medical media company Stat reporter by the name of Damien Gande, Gande, who is the national biotech reporter for Stat News, wrote an expose in 2016 about Moderna and the ego, ambition, turmoil plaguing one of biotech's most secretive startups. And that was a quote. And I'll repeat that. Quote, ego, ambition, and turmoil plaguing one of biotech's most secretive startups, end quote. So, again, Moderna was founded in 2010 to commercialize the research of Boston Children's Hospital cell biologist Derek Rossi. Gard reported that the effort to turn a profit by creating Moderna, which intimately involved controversial scientist and close Bill Gates associate Bob Langer, as well as Flagship Ventures, which is now known as Flagship Pioneering, began soon after Rossi published a report on the ability of modified RNA to turn skin cells into different types of tissues. I remember that. I do remember, was a while back, but I do remember reading about that. I worked at an infusion pharmacy, and this was talked about by some of the pharmacists that I worked with. So the hullabaloo around Rossi's research and its potential to make medical breakthroughs lost interest. So then Moderna teamed up with AstraZeneca and raised records amount of funding, but still had no product on the market 6 years after its founding. So then, right after that, there was Moderna had a head of research and development by the name of Joseph Bolen, Bolen. And for some reason, this guy resigns. And it was a concern to the investors. He had been with the company 2 years. A company insider said the only reason Bolen would leave is if there was something wrong with the science or personnel. So, and what I take that to mean is that either the science was underpinning Moderna's massive valuation, it didn't live up to the hype, or Bansal forced him out, or possibly both. So they were hyping up his work to bring in money, and he caught wind of it and wasn't comfortable with it, or Bansal forced him out, which he could have. It could have been a combination. I looked. I tried to find interviews with Bolin to see if he ever talked about why he left, and I couldn't find anything. Now, Theranos. Theranos has been in the news. I'm sure everyone's heard of the company Theranos, and there are some comparisons between Moderna and Theranos. So Theranos was known for its extreme culture of secrecy. It kept investors and partners in the dark. It forced non-disclosure agreements on everyone who came in contact with the company, and kept employers siloed. So what siloed means it means a mindset which resists sharing info and resources with other people and departments in the organization. Theranos was praised as revolutionary and in place to, quote, change the medical industry forever, end quote. The top executive there was Elizabeth Holmes, which you may remember was on trial and was just recently found guilty for fraud, which, like Bansal, Elizabeth Holmes had no professional healthcare experience or science experience. Both companies failed to publish any evidence in peer-reviewed journals that the science behind their multi-billion-dollar valued companies was more than hot air and a sales pitch. And fortunately, to date, Moderna has never faced the same degree of scrutiny from the United States government or investigative journalists, although they need to. By the end of this, you'll hoping that you'll wonder why as well. Some possible reasons could be their close relationships with the United States Department of Defense through DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. DARPA was instrumental in the development of RNA vaccines, and they provided $25 million in financial support to Moderna in 2013 to pursue messenger RNA-based antibody drugs and vaccines. DARPA announced it was committing up to $56 million in additional funding to Moderna in October 2020. So the government was dumping money into this company 3 years after it was founded. So what is up with that? They didn't even have anything. They hadn't even brought anything to market. They were just out there talking about how great they were. So then I also want to bring up BARDA, BARDA. That is the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, which is also a U.S. government agency. And they committed $955 million to Moderna as well. BARDA was influential in resetting researchers' expectations for vaccine development. The organization set a goal of developing a vaccine 60 days after determining a pathogen's DNA sequence. Moderna had a vaccine candidate 66 days after scientists identified its genetic sequence. And we're talking about COVID here. So this is so questionable given that there were several problems with Moderna all the way up until the beginning of the pandemic. The messenger RNA gets into your system through what's a lipid nanoparticle delivery system. The lipid is the fats, so that's why it's given in the muscle. And it was toxic to humans. They couldn't get it to work. It was killing the animals in their trials. So why were we giving them enough money to feed and clothe and house homeless people? Why was that given to a company that wasn't producing anything? So, I mean, first there was Moderna's struggle to prove its technology was safe, Second, their concerns about the safety and efficacy of the company's products were publicly reported the beginning of 2017, but disappeared once the fear and panic of the COVID-19 and the warp speed race for a vaccine began. So they were starting, I think the government may have gotten tired of dumping this money into them and not getting any return. And so the shoe was about to drop on them, and then COVID-19 happened, and all of that got pushed aside. I did a lot of research looking. I couldn't find any evidence that these concerns were ever addressed prior to the government's EUA, emergency use authorization of Moderna's vaccine, which, as you probably know, is now being used in several countries. However, I wrote these notes over the last 5 weeks, and I just read a few days ago that some countries have stopped. They're questioning Moderna's safety. There are several countries questioning it, and they're wanting to stop using it. Out of all the ones available, Moderna is raising the most concern, causing the most vaccine injury. Damien Gard, which I mentioned him earlier, he's a reporter for Stat News, found in his report for Stat that there was evidence that the safety concerns were covered up both prior to and during development of the vaccine. And this is what Gard found. A report in January 2017 showed Moderna ran into troubling safety problems with its most ambitious therapy. The company was banking on a mysterious new technology to stay above water. And that new therapy was to treat Crigler-Najjar syndrome, and it's spelled Crigler-Najjar. It is a severe condition characterized by high levels of a toxic substance called bilirubin in the blood. Jaundice babies, but this is worse than jaundice. Babies born with jaundice, they put them under the ultraviolet light. It helps clear the toxin, the jaundice out of the bilirubin out of their blood, and they're okay and they're sent home. But this is a condition that can make babies pretty sick. Bilirubin is something that's produced when red blood cells are broken down. And then the substance is only removed from the body after it undergoes a chemical reaction from the liver. The liver converts the toxic form of bilirubin to a non-toxic form. So patients that have this Crigler-Najjar syndrome, they have a buildup of unconjugated bilirubin in their blood, and that can cause yellowing of the skin and eyes, brain damage called kenicterus. I'm not sure I'm saying that right, but it's spelled Kenicterus. Babies with it's Kernicterus. So babies with kernicterus are often lethargic. They have weak muscle tone. They arch their backs, among other neurological problems. So babies that have this are sick. And Bancel promised this first therapy was being produced using his new mRNA technology, and it would lead to dozens of drugs within a decade. And they specifically used this Crigler-Najjar therapy as a major selling point to investors, particularly in 2016 at the J.P. Morgan Healthcare Conference. And I'm going to say Bancel had a lot on the line at that conference, and I'm going to end this there because we really get into a lot of information. This is where things really start to, like the waters start to get deep. So I'm going to end part 1 here, and part 2, I'm not going to wait the full 2 weeks to post part 2. I will post part 2 1 week from today. And I thank you so much if you're sticking with